Hello and welcome to Missio Talk. My name is Mark Chamberlain, and this is a forum to discuss issues relating to mission and ministry in the Christchurch Diocese. Its purpose is to resource clergy and churches and to help us all develop and strengthen the way we participate with God in God's mission to the world. My guest today is Stephanie Robson, and our topic is family systems and how they relate to the church. Good morning and welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you.
So I'm intrigued by this because I'm a lifelong studier of the church, I guess. Tell us a little bit about family systems theory.
Well, family systems theory is also known as Bowen theory, and that's because a psychiatrist, Dr. Murray Bowen, put it together. And it's a way of understanding the ways that different relational connections between people shape an organisation's culture or flavour. So, for example, a church has its own personality. Churches have their own unique flavour that's not just about theology and music. It's also about the kinds of behaviours that are tolerated, things that are okay, things that are not okay. It's about the values that are held within that particular congregation around things like money, attitudes to buildings, to history, what's regarded as success, and what matters most. And that personality is made up of the collective contribution of people who have been past members of the church as well as those in the present. But it is more than that. The system evolves a culture that is kind of more than the sum of its parts. And emotion is a very significant part in all of this. The ways that church members relate to one another is all part of it all. And people are soliciting approval of one another, looking for support, often subconsciously. They react in different ways to one another's needs and expectations, and it's all determined by what's going on in this particular, each unique system. So when there is a change in, say, one individual's way of being, that will be followed by reciprocal changes in that church community. And it doesn't matter if it's something really great or something terrible. If something happens that threatens the stability of the group, then some anxiety will undoubtedly increase. And that anxiety might come bubbling out as criticism or disapproval or pushback, or it might be expressed in overwork and busyness, or it might be well managed. But whatever happens, the system will be trying to right itself and get back to the status quo. And all this connectedness and reactivity means that in a church setting, people aren't isolated individuals. They are interdependent. They influence one another and are influenced by one another all the time. And Murray Bowen identified a number of concepts to help us see what's happening in the system. And these concepts help us to be able to describe what healthy interactions look like, and also what predictable patterns of dysfunction there might be too. And you've done boundaries training with me, so you'll possibly remember the Cartman drama triangle that comes up in our boundaries training days. Emotional triangles are one of the 8 concepts that family systems theory contains. Another one is the differentiation of the self. So that's the idea that a well-differentiated person, an individual, is someone who knows who they are and has the capacity to maintain a little bit of emotional distance, objectivity, when there's a lot of anxiety buzzing around in a system. They can stay related to others, but don't have to get caught up in the swirls of it all. And then there's the opposite of that, is emotional cut-off. And that's when people get really wound up in that anxious place with everybody else, and it's all being churned and burned. They might separate, they might isolate, they might withdraw, they might run away, literally, or in their head. And some of the other things that come up in that Bowen, those 8 principles, things like dealing with emotional problems by dumping them onto someone else and blaming them for all the stuff that goes wrong in the world, or transmitting unresolved issues through different generations. They're the sorts of things that come up in family systems theory and apply quite well to church life.
Okay, so in terms of applying, that's where we want to head with this. What are some of the characteristics of a system that are particularly relevant to church life?
Well, in one of the books that the Alban Institute have produced, and if you're looking for things to read about family systems theory, the Alban Institute are fabulous. They tell a story of an event, and they tell it through the lens of 2 different churches. So the event is one Sunday morning, the caretaker arrives at church and discovers that a sewage pipe has burst inside the building and flooded the floor of one of the Sunday school rooms. So what happens? In scenario number 1, the caretaker gets on the phone to the lead minister and blasts him and says, I told you this needed maintenance. You stupid people should have sorted this out months ago. We're going to have to cancel church today. Everybody's going to be really cross with you. It's a disaster. The place is freezing. We can't do anything about heating, and it's all going to get just worse and worse and worse and cost us a fortune. In scenario number 2, the caretaker rings up the lead minister and says, there's a burst sewer pipe in the church. This is a bit of a problem for us all, for our Sunday services today. And the minister says, oh my goodness, how terrible. What do you think we could do about it? And they begin to collaborate and problem solve. The attitude difference is we are all in this together, as opposed to the more reactive, highly anxious first scenario. And so you can see that a little story like that highlights the difference that might be contained in a church community in terms of its ability to respond to challenge. It's actually a question of maturity.
Sure.
What's the sum total of the in-house maturity of these people there? Are they able to manage their anxiety together? Is there clarity around their shared purpose and their identity? How's power used? Is it guilt, name and shame, or are we nudging towards team building and togetherness? And so it's really important in church life to understand the ways that anxiety can be transmitted through our church communities. When anxiety goes up, the emotional connectedness of group members becomes more fragile. And eventually, one or more of the members will become overwhelmed, they might become isolated or out of control, and that might be because they're the kinds of people who are doing their best to accommodate the tension by absorbing it themselves. So they're trying to soak it all up and make things better for other people. Now that's one response, but it renders those people particularly vulnerable to things like depression, misuse of drugs and alcohol, or physical illness, because that's an unbearable load for an individual to carry. There are others who spread the anxiety around, so their way of dealing with their distress is to just give it away to anybody else who might pick it up for them. And anxiety is very contagious, and so it can lead to fear and rejection, and can actually harm a church community. So when the stress levels go up, we stop using those higher centres in our brain, we get really reactive, going on instincts, not necessarily making the best decisions in our lives, sometimes in a state of fight, flight or freeze. And so dissipating that anxiety, it can happen through gossip, it can happen through backstabbing. Those are not good ways. And so when we're in a crisis, a lot of those things get revealed that in normal times can stay concealed. It's kind of, as an aside, one reason why our spiritual practices are so important. Because in ordinary days, when we're doing our rhythms of prayer, when we are gathering in worship, what we're actually doing is growing a degree of fitness, health, fitness, vitality for those times when the pressure's on. We're going to draw on that resource of having been grounded in some practices that will sustain us when we're feeling battered by life's storms.
Some great insights there. So can you tell us about the kinds of circumstances in that case that an understanding of the church as a family system could be really useful for a vicar?
You know, it's actually about change of any kind, positive or negative. Change provokes anxiety.
Okay.
And that's partly because for most people, any kind of change has within it this kind of sense that something is being lost. So there are griefs that go along with it. And yes, there are losses in many of our changes. You know, like the end of somebody's ministry when they might be going to retirement. It can be a sad time as well as a lovely celebration. The beginning of a new ministry, building repairs, the launch of a new initiative, even singing a new song on a Sunday morning or changing the altar cloth. You know, all these things have led to some quite interesting times in our diocese, let alone the fires and the floods and the insurance bills. So if you know that anxiety is likely to be there in times of change, then you can address it. You can aim to be a non-anxious presence. That's the goal. Don't be fueling anxiety because it is contagious and destructive. And I'm not saying deny it and hope it will all go away. I'm saying address it with calm. So no emails at 2 a.m, no texting when angry, No sermons taking pot shots at particular individuals.
Okay.
And making it clear that when these things do happen, because,
Yeah.
you know, they do, we're humans and we sometimes do stupid stuff, respond by reducing anxiety, by doing things like reassurances. We'll get through this together. We've been down a path like this before. We know we have resources within us that we can muster for times like this. And naming it, we are all about love. We are the people of God. We're supposed to be about love. Let's aim for that. Conflict is important in church life. It's crucial for growth. It shouldn't be avoided. But how we do our conflict, that's what's crucial.
Okay, there's a lot of gems there. Sometimes a church leader could be tempted to think he's sort of sitting above the system, but that's probably not right. What are the particular roles or insights you would have for a leader's role within this?
Well, a church leader is an influential person for sure, but they can't change a system by themselves. And so if you are a man or woman in a leadership position, growth or closure, success or failure, it is not all on you. Take heart. But if you do want to bring around healthy change, then you need to be in the system before you can change it. And that means that you understand that you are subject to all those pushes and pulls within the system, the competing emotional demands, the expectations around the different roles that we occupy, a place within the hierarchy, within particular coalitions and loyalties and all the rest. But being in the system does not mean being a victim to it. And you have to develop and maintain a degree of distance and detachment to be healthy and useful. And that's that word differentiation again. Differentiation involves that capacity to manage our own anxiety and to resist just getting carried along on the anxieties of others. Good diary work can go a long way towards that, so that you're not reacting to other people's urgent and important. You know what is your urgent, what is your important. And it also means listening before setting about a change process. There might actually be some very good reasons for things being the way they are. And then the other thought I think for church leaders is that we need to have a genuine care for the people that we seek to lead. My old lecturer used to say, you love them and you feed them, then you get to lead them. And if you can't love them, then you are not the right person for the job.
Thank you. So there's so much here. How can church/missional leaders cultivate the skills that you're alluding to here so that we can grow healthy church communities?
I feel like I say this in Boundaries more and more these days. You have to get a life. You have to get a life. You need to grow good friendships that are not within your church community, because you cannot be only the job title. There is more to you than that. Attend to your needs in the appropriate context so that you're not looking to the church to fulfill your every dream and your sense of calling, because you have to remember the church is not the same as God.
Any final comments?
Take your days off. Look after your body. Grow love in your life. Cultivate a quirky sense of humour, because these kinds of things are like weed killer on systemic anxiety. And one little hobby horse, stop with the scarcity mindset that seems epidemic at the moment. Assume you have enough, enough time, enough money, enough heart to do your part in making the world a better place.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for helping us with those insights from family systems theory that do apply to church life. And I'm sure there are discussion points, lots of discussion points that can be brought out of that for our groups. Thank you.
My pleasure.